بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. أما بعد. Okay, alhamdulillah, so we've started our discussion on this topic, the fourth principle, المعقد الرابع, which was صرف الهمة فيه إلى علم القرآن والسنة. صرف الهمة في العلم إلى علم القرآن والسنة. To direct all our energies and our ambitions and aspirations towards in knowledge, towards the knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah. And we had read that the Shaykh said, إن كل علم نافع ما رده إلى كلام الله وكلام رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. That every beneficial knowledge that you can possibly think of, or that is possibly conceivable, all of that returns back to the Book of Allah and the speech of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the rest of the ulum, everything that is left aside from the speech of Allah and the speech of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they're either خادم لهما إما خادم لهما أو أجنبي عنهما. Either these sciences are servants, they serve these two, the Quran and the Sunnah, or they are strangers from these two. Okay. As far as them being servants are concerned, فيؤخذ منه ما تتحقق به الخدمة. فيؤخذ منه ما تتحقق به الخدمة. الخدمة is a service that we want to take from these ulum. ما تتحقق به, with whatever this khidmah is actualized, فيؤخذ منه. That much is taken from these ulum. Okay, the ghaya, our end goal is not to become masters of this particular science, which is just to serve as a tool, just to serve as a servant to the Book of Allah, to the Messenger, and then to ma'adallah, spend our entire lives serving one science which was simply tertiary. It was not the Book of Allah, it was not the Messenger of Allah's speech, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? It was the speech of neither of the two. So, and we had given examples of this in the previous lecture. So sciences of that nature, which serve the Book of Allah and serve the Sunnah of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we take them from them, right? Because they are servants to the book, to the original pieces of knowledge. Okay. Anything else that does not directly or indirectly serve the religion of Allah or serve the Messenger, His Sunnah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then they are strangers to the two sources of knowledge. Okay, these two sources of knowledge, they are strangers. They are completely off tangent. They are not related. فَلَا يَضُرُّ الْجَهْلُ بِهِ. Being ignorant of that stranger science, something which is not linked to the Book of Allah or the speech of His Messenger, فَلَا يَضُرُّ الْجَهْلُ بِهِ. Being ignorant of it does not harm you. You can live your entire life and die and meet Allah Azza wa Jal without having learned a single letter of these sciences, and it will not harm you. Okay, so this is a huge educational principle. I think we discussed this briefly, but inshallah we'll discuss it a bit more here towards the end as well. But basically the idea that education should be and any educational institution, any educational paradigm, mechanism, pedagogical structure should be based on the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger, and everything else comes underneath it which serves these two. Okay, طيب. And in that relation we heard the statement of Iyad al-Yahsubi rahimahullah. He said in his kitab, في كتابه الإلماع, he said, العلم في أصلين لا يعدوهما إلا المضل عن الطريق اللاحب علم الكتاب وعلم الآثار التي قد أسندت عن تابع عن صاحب. He said the knowledge is in two aslain, two sources, two foundational pegs. There's only two sources essentially. Al-asl here could, I think for the sake of ease, it's just a source, right? Al-ilm fi aslain. The ilm is only in two fundamental sources. Okay, nothing else. لا يعدوهما does not deviate from it, or does not deviate from these two, huma, إلا المضل, except the one who goes astray, عن الطريق اللاحب, from the path which is al-lahib, straight and clear. What are those two أصلين? علم الكتاب وعلم الآثار التي قد أسندت على التابع عن صاحبي. The knowledge of the book of Allah and the knowledge of the narrations which have indeed been strengthened, authenticated from the tabi'i, from the sahibi, from the sahabi, or any sahabi that has narrated it. So it has a strong connected chain of narration back to the sahaba. وَقَدْ كَانَ هَذَا هُوَ عِلْمُ السَّلَفِ. So inshallah we're going to carry on. We read up to this point in our last lesson. The Shaykh carries on, he says, وَقَدْ كَانَ هَذَا هُوَ عِلْمُ السَّلَفِ وَقَدْ كَانَ هَذَا هُوَ عِلْمُ السَّلَفِ عَلَيْهِمْ رَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ. Verily this was, i.e. the book, the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah, this was the knowledge of the Salaf. It wasn't in the mathematics or the sciences, that the natural sciences or philosophy or logic or geography or algebra, none of that. It was this, the Quran and the Sunnah, alayhim rahmatullah. This was the knowledge of the Salaf, the true inheritors of the Prophet, those who took on the baton of serving the da'wah of Islam, serving the cause of Islam. This was the source of their knowledge. They spent their entire lives learning and teaching the book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger. And then of course that included anything that is connected to the book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger. When it came to the book of Allah, it was tafsir, it was qira'at, it was tajweed, it was the asalib, or the Arabic of the Quran, the balagha. When it came to the Sunnah, it was the rijal, it was the fiqh, it was the aqidah, and so on and so forth, right? ثم كثر الكلام بعدهم فيما لا ينفع. Then كثر الكلام, speech or opinions or the expression of varying ideas and philosophies, كثر, it increased بعدهم, after them. So after the Salaf, the age of the Salaf, especially the first 3 generations, subhanallah, the kalam in the sciences which were not beneficial, it increased. I.e. people who were educated or in the external traditions like the philosophy of the Greeks or the Indians and so on and so forth, they came on the scene, and Christian scribes who were translating from foreign languages to the Arabic language, they started to creep in, the books of the foreign nations into the Arab world, the Muslim world, and based on that, some juhala, they took on those, and inshallah we'll discuss this in a bit. They took on those things, and it spread, and people started to talk about this issue and that issue, and they left the Quran and Sunnah, and therefore the Ummah, its da'wah, its jihad, after that it became slow. If you notice the proportion at which Islam expanded, it wasn't never the same, ever after those first 3 generations. Subhanallah. Okay, it only slowed down because of what happened in terms of the ilm and the spiritual backbone of the ummah, because of the increase of non-beneficial speech and non-beneficial knowledge. كثر الكلام بعدهم فيما لا ينفع. Okay, after them, then the speech in things which do not benefit, after them it sort of increased, right? People started talking about it. فالعلم في السلف أكثر. So the knowledge amongst the Salaf was more. والكلام في من بعدهم أكثر. And just mere speech, right? Empty speech, in those who were after them, it was akthar, it was more. So when the Salaf were alive, it was just about the Quran and the Sunnah, the foundation, the aqidah, the tawheed, the tazkiyah, right? And that propelled the Muslim ummah. And then after them, the kalam, subhanallah, those who came after them, other than the ulama, of course, من تبعهم بإحسان, other than those who followed them in goodness, the ulama and the muhaddithin and the ulama, other than them, majority of the people, they, subhanallah, they started writing on things and speaking about things which had no value to the ummah, to the point that when Imam Ahmad was alive, rahimahullah, someone would mention to him, oh, this person has written such and such book, or such person has written such and such book. And he would get angry and he would say, wasn't the book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger enough for us? Why do they need to write these books so that people may be distracted towards them? Subhanallah. And then Farra, he was considered, he's from the ulama of Sunnah, and Imam Ahmad used to respect him highly because he was one of the foremost ulama of lugha, language, grammar, and so on. He's the teachers of some of the most important personalities in our tradition, right? One of the biggest names in our history of the Arabic language and its preservation, and one of the ulama of the Sunnah, Salafi ulama, طيب, on Aqidah and Tawheed. He wrote a book explaining the linguistic meanings of the Quran, and Imam Ahmad, when he came across that book, he read it. He said that, subhanallah, I used to think that Farra was a good man, but after reading this book, I've changed my mind. Astaghfirullah. Right. Anyway, he's not giving a fatwa, but the thing is that he didn't like this thing. This is the general approach. You will not find the Salaf Salihin initially authoring books, other than what was absolutely necessary for certain state functions, like Umar radiallahu anh writing some letter to his vizier, his governor, X, Y, and Z, so and so. But you wouldn't find as such much writing, much authorship in the initial years, other than collection of ahadith, so tadween al-ahadith, collection of the usul that happened amongst in the time of Imam Shafi'i. Anything that serves the Book of Allah and the Sunnah, that was happening. But other than that, and even amongst that thing that, Imam Malik never wrote his usul down, Imam Hanifa never wrote his usul down. In fact, the ulama, they say that there is no specific work that survives from Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, right? Other than what his students have narrated from his fatwa. So this is the reality. Those who came after them, they started to engage in speech and writing things which were not beneficial, but rather distracted the people from the Quran and the Sunnah. Okay. قال حماد بن زيد. حماد بن زيد رحمه الله, he says, قلت لأيوب السختياني. Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani رحمه الله, he was a non-Arab tabi'i. He was a student of many of the Sahaba, and he was tabi'i jaleel. He was a very honorable tabi'i, and he's perhaps one of the most essential personalities of his time, responsible for the narration of many of the hadith that we know. And subhanallah, in one of his majalis, some of his majalis of hadith were even attended by some of the junior Sahaba who had fought with the Messenger of Allah ﷺ in the battles, and they had not narrated a hadith. But when he would narrate a hadith and they would sit in his majlis, they would testify that wallahi, we have witnessed these battles, and the way Ayyub is narrating them is exactly how we saw it. Subhanallah. Okay, so the Sahaba had gave him that kind of honor. Subhanallah. Okay, so this is the tazkiyah that he received from the Sahaba. So he's a great tabi'i. He says, even answering this question which was asked to him by Hamad ibn Zayd, he says, asking him a question, al-ilm al-yawma akthar aw fima taqaddam? Is ilm today more, or in those which has or in that which has preceded? Was ilm more today? Is ilm more today, or in those days which have preceded us, which have gone by? فقال الكلام اليوم أكثر والعلم فيما تقدم أكثر. He says the speech today is more, والعلم فيما تقدم أكثر. However, knowledge in what has preceded us, the times, it was more أكثر. Subhanallah. And لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله, Imam Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani, he's a tabi'i. He's a student of the Sahaba. He's speaking about this in his time. I mean, let alone imagine this happening in today's time. Na'udhu billahi min dhalik. Okay? So, this is the reality, brothers and sisters, that when it comes to our lives, especially in this program that we're studying, most of the students are going to be, above 18, 19, 20 anyway, right? We don't have a lot of time, especially with those who are studying. They have jobs and they have families and whatnot, right? If you truly want to save your lives, you want to save your time, you want to, benefit from this limited time that you have left on this planet. Because really, if you're 20, you don't have much time. You have maximum 22, 25 years of productive activity. After that, it becomes a bit, your energies start to dwindle, you start to feel down, your health issues start to creep in, and X, Y, and Z. Of course, inshallah, as we've highlighted in our previous lectures in the initial masterclass, if you continue with those things, inshallah ta'ala, you can increase your productive lifespan. However, generally speaking, 45 is, for most people, is the peak of their energies. And in fact, in the academic world, 40 is the peak, right? If you're above 40, for example, and you're a mathematician, you can't enter into the field, you can't qualify for the Fields Medal, for example, right? As some people say. But anyway, basically the mathematicians, especially Cambridge, they hold that that you you are productive in your research and studies up till the age of 40, essentially. That's it, right? So they have a cap on it, and this is the reality when it comes to academic fervor. It has a limit. It has a limit to it. طيب. So if you have a short time span in this life, and your knowledge that you have to seek is a lot, it's an ocean, right? How do we preserve our time such that we benefit to the optimal amount from this time that we have, so that we take away from this life, this short life that we are living, or that we will live in the next few years, we take the most benefit that we can, that we meet Allah Azza wa Jal, and He's happy with us, He's pleased with us, that we have done something for His religion. طيب. Allahu Akbar. For that, we need to stick to the Quran and the Sunnah, in the sense that even when we structure our knowledge, the way we study, it has to be structured according to these principles. Okay? طيب. Before I get into the details of this quickly, all of this discussion that we're doing over here in this fourth principle, essentially the Shaykh is trying to get us back to this one guiding principle in Islam. This is our paradigm as Muslims on the Sunnah. This is our fundamental axiom that we live by, right? But that is, in anything that we do, in anything that we see, in anything that we think, in anything that we come to believe, all of that has to be governed with one question. What were the Salaf upon? How did they understand the religion of Allah in this particular thing, for example, right? That we are pondering over. What were the Salaf upon, and how did they understand the religion in any particular issue, essentially, right? What were the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and Atba' Tabi'een, right? The Prophet ﷺ, how were they treating these issues, this religion, in this particular matter, or any matter, whether you may have. If you can always live your life with this one principle, wallahi, you will never go astray. Okay? Even when we structure our education, when we understand aqidah, when we study fiqh, when we study usul, anything that we study, we always bring back our understanding, and our way of judgment is always guided by this one principle. Okay? And in the previous century, the Salafiyya movement that was initiated by some of the ulama, like Shaykh Rashid Rida, and then others like Shaykh Albani, and then Shaykh Ibn Baz, and others. Right? It is reminiscent of the same principle. طيب. Although the labeling yourself with any one title is not a shart, it's not a condition in Islam, it is not even wajib, طيب. It is not even compulsory. However, the reason why they did that, and the principle, is basically to differentiate yourself from the people of bid'ah. طيب. So if someone wants to associate themselves and say that we ascribe ourselves to the Salaf, i.e., when we say we are Muslims, we are Muslims exactly how the Salaf were, or at least we are trying to be, right? This is how we ascribe to Islam. This is the Islam that we ascribe to. طيب. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you don't have to, and you can still live your life with this principle and still be a Salafi in principle, because that's what is important, that you live radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. You live with this ayah, that Allah was pleased with them and they were pleased with Allah. They are the only ones whom Allah Azza wa Jalla has given a stamp of authority. Okay? So they are the only ones who have the say in the religion. We always look back towards them, which is why the book, the knowledge of the book and the athar, the book and the narrations, is the fundamental knowledge. This is the only knowledge that Allah Azza wa Jalla has preserved. طيب. And this is the only source of true knowledge, which has come from Allah Azza wa Jalla Himself. طيب. Anything else is going to be conjecture, our flimsy rationale. It's going to be our weak reasoning, weak argumentation, pathetic syllogism, anything that comes from our mind is going to be flawed in some shape or form. Even if let's say you read the Quran or the Sunnah, and then with using just your intellect, you come to the right understanding of it, and you're not someone who is from Ahlul Ijtihad, from the people of Ijtihad who have studied the meanings from for example the ulama with the chain and so on and so forth. You don't have the qualities of a mujtahid, and you're just a layman, and you're reading from the Quran and Sunnah, right? For example, even if you understand some issue, just based on your intellect, and your understanding is correct, you're still wrong in the sense that you should have always relied on the checking your understanding with the book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger, and the understanding of the Salaf al-Salihin. Right? You always have to make sure that yes, you are encouraged to read the Quran, you're encouraged to read the Sunnah, and you do that all your life. You do it every week, every day with your families and whatnot. But then you always go back to the ulama who are Rabbani. Okay, you always go back to the ulama who are Rabbani and get your understanding checked, because you as a layman would not know where you've gone wrong. But in any case, you always bring back your understanding to this one principle. Now, a very important thing that we need to discuss here is, why did people in the past go wrong in terms of all these schools of Islamic theology that have crept up, the bid'ah that crept into Islamic theology, Islamic aqidah, like Ash'arism and Maturidism and Mu'tazilism, Jahmism, all of these big, Khawarijism, all of these big fitna labels, groups that were essentially, misguided, mubtadi'een. Even if they came as a response to some other previous bid'ah, they still fell into the same bid'ah. Why did people go wrong? Where did they go wrong, right? They went wrong in this very principle. They did not question everything that was served before them using this principle. Okay? If a certain usul is being taken on, if a certain principle is being adopted, if a certain opinion about anything is being taken aboard, it's been adopted, it's been accepted, it should have been questioned, right? And it is now, for example, after hundreds of years, that the ulama like Ibn Taymiyyah and some before them as well, they started questioning these things. That this is the reason why the Ummah at that point, and this huge group of people, went into this abyss, this rabbit hole of a Jahmi philosophy, or the Greek, this entire philosophical tradition in Islam. It was because they thought, okay, you know what, this makes sense. This makes sense, right? So this principle that they, for example, there's either, you either have concepts, or you have definitions, concepts and definitions, tasawwur wa tasdeeq. This dual partition of anything that is ever, possible to be known, right? Accepting just these two divisions of that, of course, and say, yeah, that makes sense. Either something is a concept, or it can be defined, or either it's in your head, or you can express it. There's nothing in between, right? So they accepted. They said, okay, you know what? This makes sense. This is 100% true. They accepted these principles as if it was a revelation, foolproof, free of any error. And they failed to question what were the Salaf upon in this particular issue. How did they understand the religion when it comes to this particular problem? Because they did not question everything, and they did not see everything under this guiding principle, and under the light of this fundamental axiom that we've just discussed, right? Things started going wrong. Things started to go out of hand. People started to be misguided. People started writing things which were misguiding. Everything just, went out of control. And then the ulama of the Sunnah were brought to a test. They were lashed. Some of them were killed. So much happened, right? Because of this very, very fundamental thing not being understood by some juhala, some ignorant people, that everything should have been judged according to how the Salaf understood the Quran and the Sunnah. Okay? So the principles and paradigms, they were adopted. Either they were internally sourced or they were externally sourced. For example, when we talk about the external sources, we've mentioned the example of the principles of Greek philosophy or Greek logic. the same Greek logic that other Greek logicians have criticized. Aristotle wrote his treatise on logic, then other Greek logicians, they came and criticized that conception of logic. Muslim philosophers, Al-Farabi and Ibn Sina, right, the idiots, they adopted them and thinking that, the great father, or the great the great thinker Aristotle, he's known as the first father. Then there's Al-Farabi, and then the teacher, the great teacher is Aristotle, and then the second great teacher is Al-Farabi, and then the third is Ibn Sina, and all of that. It happened because they started to adopt these principles and paradigms as they took them, as they got them, right, without having the guiding light of the Quran and Sunnah. Okay, so this was the external sources kind of thing, external sources that sort of had an impeding effect on the adaptation of the principles and paradigms and the rejection of the Islamic values by these thinkers. Then the internal sources would be such as Imam Malik or Imam Abu Hanifa, making principles to accept hadith, for example, or to accept a certain action based on some principle that they think is valid, without thinking about the wider consequence. And of course, I'm going to mention why this internal internally sourced principles and paradigms which are incorrect, they were adopted. Why were they adopted? It was primarily because knowledge at that point initially was spread quite far and wide. It was not collected in one place. So it was very possible or plausible that initially the ulama, they based their opinions on something that was available to them. Imam Abu Hanifa, because he was really far away, right, in Baghdad, away from Medina and the real centers of knowledge at that point, he was really disjointed from the sources of a hadith, for example. And then he, because of the fitna of the fabrication of a hadith, he made some principles of his that he thought would be valid. طيب. And then they made principles such as, if a khabar is wahid, it is narrated with one chain, there's no other supporting chain to it, for example, then this hadith is when it comes in, let's say, in contradiction, so quote unquote contradiction to an ayah in the Quran, then we leave this more precisely, they would say that, okay, this is the ayah, and this is the precise meaning, this is the khas meaning, which is ma'na khas of it, specific meaning of it. And then the hadith is mentioning something which is general, which is not essentially contradicting, but in the sense that the principle they've made is that no specific meaning of the Quran should be made general by just a single hadith. And anyone who has some sort of basic fitrah alive in them, they would think that, surely this principle that you're making is made by yourselves. You can't prove the same principle from the Quran and Sunnah, right? So why do you make this principle a guiding sort of the criterion between accepting and rejecting narrations? Anyway, so this is one example. Then the Malikiya, they would come in, they would say, we found the people of Medina acting in a certain way, and so therefore we don't accept this particular hadith, even though it goes against the practice of people in Medina. They would rather accept the practice of people in Medina and reject, or not accept, sorry, they wouldn't reject, but they would not accept in terms of action or fatwa, for their fatwa, a hadith which was authentic. Okay? Now, of course, all the ulama, they have said that if a hadith which is sahih, according to what they understood, was correct and it was against the madhab, they should accept the hadith and they should throw away the opinion of the madhab, right? All the ulama, they have said it. So inshallah, because of this, they have an udhr, they have an excuse with Allah Azza wa Jalla bi-idhni ta'ala. We make dua for them, rahimahullahu jami'a. May Allah have mercy on them, all the ulama, the a'imma of the salaf salihin, the fuqaha, initial fuqaha. But these are some of the internal paradigms that were adopted without holistically understanding the sunnah and the manhaj of the sahaba, and then basing your opinion on that. Because of in that initial year, in those initial years, the Mujaddideen, the Sahaba, they had spread quite far and wide. And so when Imam Ahmad and Imam Shafi'i came on the scene, they traveled. Imam Abu Hanifa never traveled outside his locality. Imam Malik never traveled. So their perspective on these things was limited. But Imam Malik, because he was in Medina, he was mostly close to the Sunnah, except in some issues. But then Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, because they traveled to collect all the Sunnah in one place, their madhahib are the closest to the Sunnah. The closest to the Sunnah. Subhanallah. And then the principles they adopted, they were checked by this manhajiyah, right? So subhanallah, you will see how this, when the Quran and Sunnah, when it is gathered, right? When the Sunnah is one place, it allows you to collect and holistically understand an issue, for example, right? And then you can sort of critique certain principle, certain paradigm that has been adopted, either from external sources or from internal sources, okay? SubhanAllah, so the point being that all this ikhtilaf, this difference of opinion, this distinction, all of that will just it will squeeze down to minor issues in which ikhtilaf is acceptable. Difference of opinion is acceptable, which is, it is something which is natural, which is going to happen, it is unavoidable. And that is something which is the way of the Sahaba anyway, that you are allowed to have a disagreement in the furu'at, in the issues of fiqh, the ibadat, for example. And then we say that all of those differences are acceptable. They're just different varying ways of ibadah, and that's it. It's not an ikhtilaf which is contradictory to each other. طيب. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah in his muqaddimah of usul al-tafsir, he writes this very clearly. He says that in the time of the Sahaba, there was no such thing as ikhtilaf al-tadad, which is the disagreement or differences of contradiction. Rather, it was it was a difference of interpretation, right? Which came from the lugha essentially, and that is essentially allowed, right? And that is the rahmah that Allah Azza wa Jalla has placed in the Arabic language for the ummah, that certain things can be understood in a varying amount of ways. It has a limit to it, those interpretations, and the Sahaba, they use those interpretations, right? Alhamdulillah. So anything that is sort of encapsulated within this bubble of the Quran and Sunnah, that is all authentic and acceptable, and that it should be used by us today to guide our reasoning, our understanding in every single thing that we come across. Okay, so when it comes to our studies now, why is it that we always, we divert our energies towards the knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah, and nothing else, other than that, other than of course the ulum that serve the sciences, right? The Quran and Sunnah. Allahu Akbar. So how the studies should be structured, okay, and the harams of the modern education systems in terms of the madaris, in terms of the schools, in terms of universities, and everything else. Let's start with the madahib. I mentioned this briefly the other day, but basically what happens is, when the way the madaris are structured is that the madaris in an 8-year program, or the universities, for example, in a 4 to 6 to 8 to 10 year programs, the Medina and Quran Azhar, for example, the education is primarily divided into 3 sections. One is the study of Arabic language, the second is fiqh, and the third is theology, aqidah, right? Hadith and the tafsir are studied, and seerah are studied, but they're studied in a much more sort of a passing manner, right? These 3 are essentially the core components of an education. طيب. When the Quran and Sunnah are not studied with urgency, then what happens is that people, they graduate with 8 years of experience or 10 years of experience without having any true connection with the Book of Allah or the Sunnah. They will graduate without having developed the tools of ijtihad. Because how do you know the salah is perhaps 4 raka'at, okay, for dhuhr or asr? طيب. You can either say, well, the hadith says it, right? Or you can say that, we read this in Zad al-Mustaqni', for example, right? We studied in Al-Quduri, in the books of, these madhahib, right? Okay, طيب. What if someone prays more than that for dhuhr, right? What if he prays 6 fard, right? What do we do there? A graduate from these universities, right? Normally, yes, of course, they will say, "Oh, this is against the sunnah and this shouldn't be." But this answer is coming after years of having been trained in that answer. طيب. But if any other issue comes, for example, such as the issue of Hajj, right? The issue of let's say the person who he wants to go to Hajj, but because of some bandits or some illness, he's been restrained from going to Hajj. He's not able to go to Hajj. طيب. What does he do with his hadi? Okay, what if he cannot find a hadi, right? Does he still fast the 3 days in Hajj and 7 when he goes back, right? When these tough issues come, you know how they would answer? They would say, "Oh yes, the book, so it's mentioned in Zad al-Ma'ad that this." So when they go back to find an answer for this, they will always go back to the book of fiqh. What do the ulama say about this? What does the speech of the faqih say, right? So their masdar for solving an issue in Islam, in a fiqh issue, is always going to be the books of fiqh of their madhahib, right? Because they don't have a direct connection to the book of Allah and the sunnah of His Messenger. طيب. This becomes an issue, a rather serious aqidah issue, when a lot of times that we observe, especially in Pakistan, I mean, the tradition in Saudi is different in a sense that they're more closer to the Sunnah, and they're humbly in a sense. So they have more sort of training in this. They do have some sort of connection to the Quran and Sunnah, but the issue it exists over there as well. But it's more prevalent in our lands, the subcontinent lands or the Ajami lands. You ask them an issue, and the way they solve an issue is by making a qiyas on some statement in the book of fiqh, like Quduri, for example. And of course, this qiyas is batil. This qiyas is incorrect. You can't make a judgment based on the speech of a human being, right? To source your ruling on the statement of a human being, which is what they do, طيب, right? It could take you to shirk, right? It could take you towards kufr, طيب, because of course, it comes down to aqidah, or based on that. But this is in practice. This is what happens. Great muftis, people of knowledge in these madhahib, the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to an issue, it is always some sort of statement in the books of fiqh, not the Quran and not the Sunnah. Unfortunately, subhanallah. So this is not the way to educate yourselves in terms of the Islamic education. طيب. In terms of the worldly sciences, as we said, anything that does not serve the Quran and Sunnah directly, then it is something which is not going to harm you if you remained ignorant of it. So, for the purposes of students who are studying at a later age, and especially for young students as well, but most importantly for the ones who are elder in age, if you started your education in the way that the Sufi seminaries do, they will have you study jadal, art of disputation, disagreement, the art of debating in Islam, right? They will teach you logic, they will teach you philosophy, Hidayah and Al-Mabdi and these kind of books. They will teach you, they will teach you, for example, Al-Hisab in mathematics, and then they will teach you geometry in the Arabic tradition and so on and so forth. And subhanallah, these sciences unfortunately have come to be the measuring stick of how strong a curriculum is of an institute, right? Or are they studying modern philosophy? Or are they teaching mathematics? Are they teaching science alongside Islam, right? I mean, a person can remain ignorant of any of these things and still go to meet Allah with passing marks, right? So these things should, not be the measuring stick of how good a curriculum is. طيب. Should a good curriculum include some of these elements? Yes, as long as they serve the case of Islam. Okay, they serve the cause of Islam. Okay, So as a starting point, the best thing that you can do, which will save you time, and inshallah it will grant you the tools of ijtihad to become a mujtahid bi-idhnillahi ta'ala, are essentially four things, right? Four things. One is the knowledge of the Quran. Okay, anything that concerns the Quran, based on its ulum, its qira'at, its tajweed, and its usul, right? And of course, everything comes in together in the tafsir of the Quran and its hifz, right? That is the ilm of the Quran that serves tayyib, inshallah. Okay, and anything that from the tertiary sciences, such as mathematics, that helps you, for example, understand the numerical issues, such as the ayat of inheritance and X, Y, and Z, right? These things, those mathematics becomes sort of a tool to understand those things. Okay, so we take that, right? The Quran, right, that's that. The Sunnah, anything that connects to the Sunnah in terms of its memorization, its fiqh, so fiqh al-hadith, understanding it. It's usul, so from the usul of validating a narration, the principles of authentication, so usul al-hadith, musalah. And then of course that is included within the wider subject of ulum al-hadith, right? And it includes every other thing that you can imagine in the sciences of hadith. And there's few other tertiary sciences that you study in the science of hadith, such as the gharib al-hadith, the vocabulary of a hadith, words which are gharib, which are essentially they're not as clear, right? So ulama have written dictionaries on that, right? And then sometimes gharib is referred to just general dictionary of the language of the hadith, right? Anything that you come across a hadith and you don't know what it means, a certain word in it, perhaps you go and open a dictionary and you look in the books of gharib al-hadith and you get the meaning of it. You can also look at the meanings of those particular hadith in a book of lugha, a dictionary, for example, qamus. But the gharib al-hadith, what it does is it eases the path for you by contextualizing the meaning for the hadith. So it's beneficial in that sense. Anyway, so these are some 8 sciences that you study. Tayyib. Right, and then when it comes to the third thing, that is the Arabic language. So mastering the Arabic language, okay, in all of its turuq, in all of its ways, all of its sciences, nahwu, sarf, balagha, istiqaq, tertiary sciences. Then the sciences of the balagha, ma'ani, bayan, badi', tayyib. Sciences of the ash'ar, because you're going to come across a lot of poetry in the books of Sunnah and books of Seerah, for example, right? So you need to understand, how the Sahaba they wrote poetry and X, Y, and Z. So it resonates with you a bit more. طيب. Then there's the lugha side of it. Then there is the ma'ani side. The deeper aspects of the Arabic language, which is it's a connection essentially of all the different sciences when they come together, right? So books like Mathal al-Sa'ir and other, these books sort of talk about this, the deeper aspects of the Arabic language, right? Dalail al-I'jaz, these are essentially topics of balagha, right? So anyway, the tools of the Arabic language, okay? Mastery, the deep mastery of the Arabic language, the poetry of the Arabs, especially Imam Shafi'i, for example, famously, he spent almost 10 years with the tribe of Al-Hudayl, right? The Hudayli tribe, and he memorized more than 20,000 lines of poetry from that tribe, or something along those lines, subhanAllah. So it is important that we master the Arabic language. The fourth thing that we need to master is usul al-fiqh. Usul al-fiqh, the principles of jurisprudence, essentially is the science that teaches us how to think like a Muslim. It is the fundamental. It's the foundation of aqidah as well. Usul al-fiqh is not just a science that you study for understanding the rulings, the fiqhi rulings, right, of ibadat and mu'amalat. No. Usul al-fiqh are the same usul that are used for understanding aqidah as well, right? And then the usul that some of the usul that are being used or that are being taught, being discussed in the books of usul, there are themselves points of aqidah that we need to understand. Okay? These four essentially are the crux of knowledge. When someone has studied at least a good amount of these four, and then inshallah, by the end of it, he's become a da'i, right? And so I've not mentioned aqidah because aqidah essentially is a science that is included within the Quran and Sunnah. So even when we study the books of aqidah separately, they are essentially talking about the Quran and the Sunnah. So we always go back and forth between Quran and Sunnah in the text of aqidah. Okay. It is after this point that a student has become a da'i. MashaAllah, they've they have a very good they have tools for ijtihad, inshallah. They have a very good understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. They have memorized the Quran. They have memorized a portion of the Hadith, right? And then if they now want to become someone who wants to give fatwa, right? It is then important for them to understand and study the different schools of thought. Okay, so the study of a particular school of thought, it comes much later, and not with, you don't study a particular madhab to adopt a madhab, right? Rather, you study the madhab to understand how the jurists of that school were thinking, how they were formulating their opinions, and then you study the other madhab, and you study the other madhab. You study all of them, one by one, right? So that you are holistically educated, right? You're not bound, you're not closed and indoctrinated in just one way of thinking by just one group of scholars. And in subhanAllah, and when you're educated in this way, subhanAllah, very, very soon, very, very early on, you would start pointing out in your mind and to others that this particular thing that this book is talking about, or this madhab is talking about, it does not correlate with the understanding of the Salaf al-Salihin or the Sahaba, in terms of the matan, or in terms of the usul are wrong, for example. You'll be able to very quickly see. This is something that the ulama who've gone down this path, especially the Sahaba, I mean, how they had no books of fiqh at that point, right? They would go to a Sahabi, yes, he would have certain opinions, but he would mention the hadith first, and then he would say, this is what we understood from it. The Sahaba had their opinions, so they were known as the madahib of the Sahaba. But their madahib essentially are the hujjah, right? Because they are the Sahaba, they understood the Quran and Sunnah directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But having these particular schools of thought written, codified and canonized, this was not non-existent. So when we follow this methodology, we're going to save our time, because we are developing the tools that are going to allow us to become mujtahideen, inshallah, being able to understand the Quran and Sunnah directly, being able to infer issues directly from the Quran and Sunnah, right? We fix our paradigms. So whenever we come across a principle, anything from later on in logic, or inshallah, when in your studies you'll notice this, subhanallah, as we study, you will notice how some of the books that we've chosen, they have been written for this very purpose. They have reduced the study of that science, they've eliminated anything that was necessary from logic and philosophy and these kind of things. They've removed those things, and they've just focused on the actual usul that concern us as Muslims and becoming ulama, inshallah. Okay, Bismillah ta'ala. So the principle is that we always divert our energies, we exert our energies towards the knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah, in its hifz, in its understanding, in its ulum, and propagating the sciences, propagating the Quran and the Sunnah. Okay, and our guiding principle when it comes to understanding anything in Islam is always, what were the Salaf upon? What was their understanding of this of the religion as a whole, and of this particular issue that we are observing, or any particular usul that is in front of us? Okay, when we will have this, inshallah, we would be able to do a holistic tanqih. We'd be able to purify our religion in today's time from all kinds of encroachments, anything that was not supposed to be there, and be able to present a purified version, such as exactly the same as it was back in the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, to the world, and revive the religion as a whole, inshallah, as a result of this approach, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay, so this is the fourth principle. So after you have purified your intentions, you've purified your heart from the shahwat and shubuhat, and you've become sincere, inshallah ta'ala. But you need to, when you do divert your energies, and you have high aspirations in knowledge, you have to divert your energies towards the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger, and dedicate your lives for its revival. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala.